Okay, so I hope everybody's okay with the screen. Is that a thumbs up, Yvette?
Yes, all good, thank you. Yeah.
Oh, good.
Sorry.
Okay. Right. The first few slides that you'll see are courtesy of artist Jane Stanley from her book, A Brush with the Past. Her paintings are a result of her research and discussions with experts from the Cornwall Heritage Trust, Cornwall Archaeological Society, the Royal Cornwall Museum and Exeter University. Mesolithic Britons travelled to where food was to be found, which could be on the moor around Dosnbury Pool for deer, down to the coast when shoals of fish came close to the shore, or the forests that were covered mostly, most of Cornwall, for fruit, nuts, berries and roots. Perhaps I ought to say that you won't see many slides of Larders, although it's called A Look into Liskeard Larders. That was mainly chosen because of alliteration. Soil samples show that wheat, barley, oats and peas were grown around Penhale Round in the late Iron Age and Roman period. Fragments from a rotary quern for grinding the grain was also found. Salt extraction from seawater was produced for the preservation of meat and fish by the Romans. 50 litres of water was needed to produce 1.5 kilos of salt. Some evidence of the process has been found near Coverack. Bread made from wheat, barley or rye was the staple diet in medieval times, although animal and fish bones were discovered at Restormel Castle to indicate that the wealthy visitors enjoyed a diet of a bit more than bread. A surviving cookery book from the 13th century gives us more information. Vegetables were few, but wild fruits were plentiful. Spices were brought from the Arab countries by pilgrims: cinnamon, cloves, pepper, ginger, nutmeg and caraway. Honey was the main sweetener. Beer and cider were the common drinks, but the wealthy enjoyed wine from Bordeaux. Pork, venison, poultry and fish were for the wealthy, broths, soups, hashes and bread for the rest. For centuries, rabbits or conies have been an important source of food, particularly from around 1800 when they were released from captivity and became freely available to everybody. Prior to that, rabbit warrens in Cornwall belonged to the medieval elite and carried connotations of wealth and status. Rabbit fur was used widely for the making of clothes. Their earliest reference in our county was a conigarium at Tintagel in the 1297 accounts of the Oldham of Cornwall. On the 27th of November 1784, Edward, Lord Eliot of St. Germans, leased from the Duchy of Cornwall several woods for £24 13 shillings a year, but he had to pay a down payment of £3,848 15 shillings. Included in the lease of these 181 acres of woodland were the hunting rights for deer and rabbits, and several contained rabbit warrens. Those were the woods at Lilywood at Lanloon, Cliverwood at Trevelmond, Doubleboys Wood, Coningswood at Moorswater, and woods at Lady Park and Highwood. So in medieval times in England, people mostly ate using knives, fingers and spoons. Post-medieval table forks had 2 prongs, with 3 from the end of the 17th century. Pistol grip handles on forks matched pistol grip knives when they were in fashion in the 18th century. This fork in the Museum of London was found in Cornwall. John Allen, writing in 1856, found several references to food in the mayor's accounts and court records. 1496, the jury present and ordain that all bakers make good dough, and from it pennyworths, oblates, quadrants of white bread, and of black bread, pennyworths and oblates. In 1604, wine and sugar to the under sheriff, 2 shillings and 6pence. To the high sheriff, Sir F. Godolphin, a sugar loaf, 24 shillings. 2 seams of fish and 8 capons, £10, 4 shillings. 2 dozen capons, 2 dozen chickens, and a dozen geese, 58 shillings. And in 1725, for the church wardens on Ascension Day, ale and buns, as usual, 13 shillings and 4pence. In 1811, the most common food of the labouring class is barleywood, with tea and salted fish. Many, however, use wheaten bread and are able to indulge in some meat for their pasties and suppers. They had an advantage from the great plenty of fish. Indeed, the poor are in general better fed and clothed in Cornwall than in most other counties. In 1846, for persons at the New Almshouses, that was in Church Street South, 6-penny loaves every Sunday cost £1, 6 shillings and 8pence. The banks of the Tamar were celebrated for the abundant growth of the cherry. The small black variety were called mazars. The first market house in Liskeard was built around 1574 and demolished and replaced in 1821 at the cost of £800. The architect for the new market house was John Falston, whose fee was 15 guineas. Writing in the Cornish Times in the 1930s, local artist John Kirkin Broad gave his boyhood memories of the market in the 1880s. Hawkers sold carts in the streets according to what was in season: cabbages, new potatoes, strawberries, and apples to bake, boil, roast or fry. On market days, stallholders sold cabbage and broccoli plants, early rhubarb, baskets of homemade toffee, cherries tied into penny bunches, and old-fashioned peppermint rock. The market house was a hive of industry. Top floor was crowded with farmers' wives selling butter, eggs, ducks and chickens. On the ground floor, a chattering bevy of saltash fishwives sold shrimps, mussels and pickled cocks of all denominations. A penny entitled one to a tiny dish with a pin from the stallholder's matronly bosom. Fruit, vegetables and confectionery were on the middle floor. In 2004, during the redecoration of number 8 Church Street, workmen uncovered a shop sign for Thomas Strip, dealer in tea, coffee, snuff and tobacco. In 1840, Thomas is listed as a coffee house keeper, the teetotal equivalent of a public house. Thomas is shown in the 1851 census at the age of 70, still running his coffee house, with his wife Mary Ann, his aunt Agnes, who was 96, a good age for that time. She was a former schoolmistress, but now a pauper. And they took in 2 lodgers as well, a plumber from Probus and a carpenter from Southampton, Virginia, North America, which seems to be the Cornish diaspora in reverse. Aboard the Charlotte Jane in September 1850, a party of colonists left Plymouth for Christchurch in New Zealand. Among them was James Edward Fitzgerald, who became the first Prime Minister of New Zealand, and whose granddaughter Una married Albert de Castro Glove of Pendine, Liskeard. For the journey, each adult was allocated 1 sheep, 1 pig, and a dozen head of poultry. The galley was provided with spices, curry powder, salad oil, herbs and celery seed, sauces, preserved fruit, tamarinds, apples, macaroni and dried yeast for making bread. On September the 13th, they ate roast beef and fat beef steak for breakfast, and soup, hot boiled beef, cold mutton, fowl and duck, hot apple pie and macaroni pudding for dinner. Later in the voyage, when the livestock had been consumed, preserved meat and fish were sometimes augmented by freshly caught shark and dolphin. Since the Guildhall was built in 1859, the ground floor was known as the Shambles, home to the butcher's stalls. In 1870, Samuel Penny of Magdalen Farm rented stall number 22 for 3 shillings and 3 pence per week. And here's a little tale from J.K. Broad. A dog having bolted with a large piece of meat, Samuel hastened off to Mr. Sargent, the solicitor, to know what had better be done about it. Of course, said the lawyer, the dog owner must pay. What would you consider the value of the meat? 6 and 6pence, said Samuel. And whose dog is it? Please, sir, the dog is yours. Oh, I see, said Mr. Sargent. Now, in that case, my fee for the advice being 6 shillings and 8 pence, you simply hand me 2 pence, and that's the whole thing put to rights. In the 1960s, Mr. Griffin had a fish and chip shop under the Guildhall, probably where Pengilly's is today. He produced his own crisps, the Liskeard, which contained potatoes, edible oil and salt, weighing at least 1 ounce. The crisp packet is one of the strange things that you can see at Liskeard District Museum. In 1869, George Camp, innkeeper of the Fountain on the Parade, made a short-lived attempt at diversification. He advertised in the Cornish Times for agents to sell his Fountainhead products, pure lemonade, sparkling champagne, and first-class ginger beer, all healthy, invigorating, and refreshing. James Parkin and his wife Emma had their own bakery in Church Street North in 1871. I think the house is still called the Old Bakery, where their daughter Louisa was their assistant. On her father's death, Louisa continued the business and was still there in 1939, age 81, still looking after the shop. In 1862, there were 9 bakeries in Liskeard to choose from. So with all the competition, they must have sold a very good product. The Cornish Times of 3rd of January 1857 reported that the inmates of the Liskeard Union Workhouse were regaled with tea and cakes on Christmas Day. And at the meeting of the Guardians held on the 27th of December, 6 pence per head was ordered to be given to all permanent outdoors paupers during the following week, in addition to their weekly pay. Those outdoor paupers would have been living in the almshouses that were in Church Street South. It certainly was a treat compared to their normal diet. This is the diet in 1876. Breakfast, 5 ounces of bread and 1.5 pints of gruel. Midday, 4 ounces of bread, 1.5 pints of pea soup, and 12 ounces of suet pudding, or 5 ounces of meat and 8 ounces of potato. And for supper, more bread, a little cheese, and broth or milk. In 1881, the barley sheaf in Church Street was run by 42-year-old widow Elizabeth Hill. She did a good job, as recalled by J.K. Broad, who was a young grocery delivery boy at the time. With agriculturalists, the barley sheaf was at the time one of the most popular houses in town. The market day dinners having a wide reputation. How vivid my memory of those long stables packed with horses and the tap room with glistening copper and foaming jugs. My Saturday dinner was almost invariably a beef pasty from the barley, but taken with a cup of tea, only for me. Here's a nice touch on Henry Will's 1894 calendar with the little girl asking, "Who is it, Granny?" The wholesale and family grocer claimed their special tea at 1 shilling and 6pence is unrivaled. In 1909, Wills had become a high-class grocer and offered coffee roasted daily on the premises and Gilbey's celebrated wines and spirits. Visitors will be waited on and orders executed with the utmost dispatch. Although there was no vegetarian dishes for the main courses, there were 8 other courses without meat. Mayor Lee had a tailor shop in 4th Street next to the Guildhall and lived at number 1 Manley Terrace, Station Road. The choices on the menu, there were oysters to start, two types of soup, fish course, entrees, removes, that would be beef, mutton, turkey, chicken and ham, then game, pheasants or partridges, for sweets, Baroness pudding, jellies, apple tarts, stewed fruit and junkets, savouries, cheese straws. Oh, I had some of those tonight, so things haven't changed much. Then the dessert, then coffee. In 1862, there were 19 grocers in Liskeard, and Broad's was one of the longer lasting. Advertising in the shop window included delightfully fragrant coffee and Libby's ox tongues. The receipt from 1903 suggested the customer, a Miss Pierce, and I think she came from Tremedden House, should always use milk-made full cream milk and a tin of full cream condensed milk kept in the house is a boon for the housewife and mother. So leading up to Christmas 1905, gold and silver medalist W.H. Edmonds assured his customers that his Christmas cake, saffron cake, mince pies, tartlets and iced almond cake were all made under personal supervision and quality guaranteed the same as last year. The address of 2 Lower Street, which he gives there, is interesting in that in the 1930s, for unknown reasons, the post office changed the numbering system so that it used to start with number 1 at the bottom of the east side of the street, rising consecutively to the top, crossing over the road, and then coming back down the west side. And the new system is what we know today, with the odds on the east and the evens on the west. So if you want to know where number 2 in 1905 was, you need now to find number 3, which is at his attic. Confused? The same applies to 4th Street, which is even more confusing. In the background of the photo of Mayor Huddy presenting a silver casket and scroll to the Queen's grandparents in 1909, they were on their way to open the Prince of Wales shaft above Minions. Can be seen the shop window of Young & Son at the top of Pike Street. Young's combined chemist and grocer, or surgical appliances with Danish bacon. Arthur Harrison was a honey producer and reared queen bees, the Caradon Queens, in Lincolnhall, starting in the 1930s. The Caradon Queens, a lovely docile bee, their honey sold for 8 shillings and 6pence across the world from Scotland to Kenya. Arthur recorded proudly that his honey was so well known that Young's grocers in Liskeard sold it for 1 shilling and 8pence when all the others sold for only 1 shilling and 6pence. No, there was no need for medical attention in 1933 for rheumatism, arthritis, neuritis, diabetes, gout, insomnia, or indigestion, because Mat Real, this wonderful anti-rheumatic Brazilian tea, with all the invigorating characteristics and delicate flavour of ordinary tea, has definite curative results with suffering from any of the above. Another advert from Fred J. Rickard toned down the claims a little bit. He announced that it is better to understate than overstate. It is better for customers to be pleasantly surprised than unpleasantly disappointed. O's is probably the only shop name in today's talk that can still be seen in Liskeard today. A full history was written by one of the family and can be seen in Liskeard Museum. Their adverts appeared every week in the Cornish Times, including this one from 1909, when Pete Freen's biscuits were being pushed and sold by the pound. Cutter Cake, Digestive, Melton, Texas and Snapdragon at 7p a pound. Berry, Treasure and Wine Mixed at 9p per pound. Homemade jams and marmalade from 4p to 6p per pound. Lobsters were down in price, but they came in £half-pound cans at 9.5p. In an earlier advert, Andrews described himself as the mayor's cake maker, which may have influenced Mrs. Vosper to choose him to supply the bride cake for a family wedding. Other items for the do on the fancy bread and biscuit maker's 1915 receipt were 4 dozen tartlets, 4 dozen mixed buns, 2 dozen tea buns, 3 brown loaves, and 2 white loaves, totaling £1, 2 shillings and 9p. In 1933, Crawford's advertised cigarettes, fruit, chocolates and cake, and next door in their central cafe, luncheons and teas were served. Fruit was both local and from London, and cakes were by Lyons, Fullers and Goodbodies. A regular customer in the tea rooms was the Foy author, Sir Arthur Couch. In the windows of Cradick's are advertisements for Lyons tea, cocoa, extract and chocolate, for Cadbury's chocolate and cocoa, and Fry's celebrated chocolate. Also, Reckitt's blue tablets, a whitener to stop cotton items yellowing as they got older. In the 1930s, Cradick's advertised the largest selection of tested seeds in the town. Seed potatoes were Sharps Express and Mary Queen, 1 shilling and 6p, and 1 shilling and 9p per gallon, all having been sprouted. A gentleman from Dulo, recalling his days on Colehender Farm in the 1930s, told of Abe Cradick arriving from Liskeard every autumn to take his pick of the apples, pears and plums. He arrived in his pony and trap and picked the fruit for himself, filling 2-handled wicker baskets called mawns. In 1930, there were 10 butchers in Liskeard, and at least 6 had their own slaughterhouse in or around the town. One of those was James Albert Hawkin, whose son John Gideon Hawkin assisted in the shop, and at age 19 can be seen in the interesting photo from 1926. John is in the 1970 photo as well. In 1970, as well as displaying sausages and cuts of New Zealand lamb in the window, the fixtures for Liskeard Football Club can be seen, when admission to the ground to watch the first 11 was 2 shillings, and to watch the second 11 just 1 shilling. The shop was demolished in the 1970s for road widening. It's unclear in Trelawney's advert whether the refreshing and good claim refers to the popular brands of cigarettes or the fruit, which you should eat more of to keep fit. And I wonder what the £500 guarantee that came with the College Boy Sweets was all about. I'm not sure of the exact location of Trelawney's, but the advert tells us that it was where your bus stops on Baytree Hill. I'm just going to turn my light on, it's getting a bit dark. Better. The Workhouse Diet in 1930 differed only slightly from the one that from 60 years ago that we heard about earlier. A bit more bread, but a bit less broth, less meat and potatoes, but the addition of cheese and margarine. So in 1930, for breakfast, 8 ounces of bread, 1 ounce of margarine or dripping, and 1 pint of broth, tea or coffee. Dinner, 8 ounces of bread, 2 ounces of meat, 2 ounces of cheese, 4 ounces of potatoes, and some salt. Supper, same as breakfast. I don't know why I'm laughing, it's not funny really. At the other end of the social spectrum, guests at the New Year's Eve dinner and dance at Webb's were struggling with a menu in French. And there's me struggling. Tomate jus cocktail, grapefruit à la maraschino, potage de beef, turbot à la crevette. I won't keep carrying on through, but my comment at the bottom is, I wonder how many of them would have secretly preferred just to have a pasty. It seems the recipes without rich, clean, full cream from Lou Mills Dairy were absolutely useless, with the added attraction of daily deliveries by H. Kelly and Son. This was a sideline for Harry Kelly, who in 1939 was a farmer and market gardener at Lady Park, and his son Reginald was a poultry farmer and also delivery man. It appears from this advert that the Empire Fruit Shop and the Parade Café, later Goodlands, had the same owners. Apparently, when spots appear before your eyes, eat more fruit, but have good fruit. 3 large grapefruit cost 1 shilling, 15 bananas, also 1 shilling. But Brazilian oranges, their price is a bit confusing because 1 shilling could buy you 12, 8, or 6. I guess it's all depending on the size of your orange. While the king, the borough of Liskeard, and the visitors were being toasted at the Civic luncheon, others were organising the special reserve ration to be distributed only if there was no food in the shops. The following was to last an individual 5 days. 3 3/4 pounds of biscuits, 1 pound of corned beef, 1 pound of baked beans, 1 pound of sugar, 6 ounces of condensed milk, 4 ounces of margarine, and 2 ounces of tin, all preserved in cans. Several ration books have been donated to the museum, and this one was, oh, I haven't got it. Aha, here we go. Missed the slide, sorry. So this ration book was donated by Nita Jago at Barras Street, who I believe was related to Jago and Sons, who sold the cars and bicycles down at Treehawk House. After the war, Norman Minard was a regular visitor from Polperro, selling fresh fish on the steps of the Guildhall and outside the old chapel in Dean Street, where the Spa shop is today. The low signpost on the side of the chapel is where Norman tucked his paper bags. If you can see from the two, we've got the sign here and the paper bag just behind Norman. Let's see, and in the background is the one opposite the chapel. That was demolished together with the chapel itself for road widening. So all those buildings have gone now. Into the 1950s now, and in between Rayner's Café in 4th Street and the shops under the Guildhall was the Star Supply stores. On May 16th, 1954, Mrs. Hayworth, wife of the future mayor, Jack Hayworth, spent 13 shillings, 3.5 pence on butter, cheese, bacon, sugar, biscuits, tin fruit salad. Nothing too different from today's shopping lists, apart from the prices and the lack of frozen foods and ready meals. When butcher Lewis Rapson had settled his bill from the wholesalers, he occasionally sketched on the back of his invoice, as this one shows on December 16th. His daughter, Molly, advised me the other day that he did this quite often, just a spare bit of paper, and he produced a watercolour. Now, the basic meat products have changed very little over the years. It's still beef, lamb, pork, and offal. Probably not so much offal these days. It's the recipes and end products that have changed. Bolognese, pizza, curries, burgers, kebabs, for example. Rapson's butcher's shop was in Windsor Place, and they supplied meat to local restaurants such as Stone's, where the kebab shop is now on the parade. A receipt to Stone's dated June 8th, 1957, was for a leg of lamb, 15 shillings and sixpence, £7 6 ounces of beef, £1 4 shillings and sevenpence, and £4 2 ounces of pork, 13 shillings and threepence. Vegetarians were still not catered for by the Liskeard cafes. The Duchy Café was on the corner of Barras Street and Pigmeadow Lane, and lunch options were roast lamb, roast pork, roast beef with 2 veg potatoes and a sweet for only 4 shillings. In the 1970s, O's are now advertising as the old-fashioned grocer. The chemist side of the business has been replaced by health foods and herbal remedies, but many residents of Liskeard today concur that they did look in and enjoy our personal service, as the advert suggests. A 7-course dinner in Lord Eliot Hotel in 1974 marked the end of the Borough Council, to be replaced by the Town Council. Orange juice or melon, consomme julienne or chicken soup, fillet of plaice, sirloin of beef, peach melba or cream caramel, cheese and biscuits, and lastly coffee. And there's a film show mentioned at the bottom there, but I would imagine they'd all fallen asleep by the time that came around. I imagine that on President's Night, the president of the Rotary Club could influence the choice of menu. In February 1980, President Frank Haley chose a fruit cocktail, vegetable soup, duck and gatto and cheese biscuits. A lighter meal perhaps, so that dancing could carry on to Roy Sanders and his music, which continued until 1 a.m. in the morning. Cecil Milford Dennis has been a pork butcher specialising. I'm skipping things again. In the photo, you can see what was once between Trowbridge estate agents and the Sewing Bee in Bay Tree Hill. It was Moon's Grocery and Confectionery, with the family cottage next door to its right. Winifred Moon is on the right in the 1972 photo. She was a music teacher, but would have helped in the family business from when she was old enough. Her father, John Hockin Moon, opened the business around 1902. Ethel Moon, on the left, married Winifred's brother Tom in 1924 and worked in the shop as well. Jars of sweets, baskets of fruit, Lyons tea, and number 6 cigarettes can be seen in on the window display. Milford Dennis had been a pork butcher in Higher Luck Street, specialising in homemade sausages since 1919. In 1939, Cecil gave his occupation as butcher, farmer, and special constable. His assistant in the shop was his 16-year-old son, Douglas. At the time of the 1995 advert, the directors were G.R. and S.A. Wilton, but such was Cecil's reputation, they retained the trading name of C.M. Dennis and Son. The Wiltons had moved with the times, selling a huge range of frozen foods, vegetables, chips, fish, chicken, pies, pizzas, ice cream, and cheesecakes. But the homemade sausages were still there, having been the speciality for over 75 years. So I'll end the talk there because it's moving away from history now and getting into present day. So thank you very much for listening.
Well, thanks very much, Brian. That was really interesting. I particularly liked the anecdote about the butcher and the lawyer, which shows you why you don't need too many poor lawyers, doesn't it? But that was a lovely story. So, Yvette, do we have any questions from the chat?
Okay, no questions yet, although we have a nice link to a recipe for mock turtle soup, if anybody wants to give it a go.
Excellent.
I think there was a suggestion, Brian, that on one of your menus, mock turtle soup was the veggie option.
Oh, I didn't, did I? I don't think anybody would go for it, really. Mind you, bird's nest soup, you don't actually get a bird's nest, do you? Hope not.
I don't think so. Well, look, if anybody does have any questions, maybe just wave at us and then turn on your microphone and ask your question.
And turn on your video, so we can see you waving.
Yes, yeah, that's a good point. Yes, first turn on your video.
Well, I'm quite happy with no questions.
Well, I've got a question, which is you know amassed a huge range of information there, Brian. How did you where did it come from? How did you go about pulling all of that together?
Oh, crikey! It's from books. It's from the museum archive. It's from the Cornish Times newspapers. It's from the Old Cornwall Society archive. I've got books, every book that there ever was on my case here from Liskeard, and really it's just, just having a few months' notice and picking out bits and pieces. And there's certainly in the past, volunteers at the museum have put together scrapbooks of advertisements, scrapbooks of I suppose the other thing, of course, is all the trade directories, where you can just go through the trade directories and, and see who was around at the time. We have, it seems that after the banquets, the celebration banquets, we have those cards and those menus in the museum, they're artifacts. So, you can just put in banquet or meal or anything you want in the word search, and then you'll come up with something, so yeah, so lots of different sources that have been gathered over the years.
Yeah, great.
Hello, Brian. Sorry.
Yes, Keith.
Okay. No, I'm just going to say I very much like the photo and your comments about the barley sheaf back from 1968, I think it was. The barley holds it's close to my heart, sort of thing, and I was pleased to see that someone has now bought it.
Yes.
And
do you know what
coming back?
Do you know what they intend to do with it?
No, carry on.
No, I don't. I'm asking.
Oh,
you.
yes. I sorry. I messaged him, and yes, he wants to return it to a pub. I know from the work I did before when we were looking at trying to do something with it, it's got so much work to do in the premise, sort of thing. In the premises upstairs, the roof and all that sort of thing. But local people, and they are certainly going to try and make a go of it. So I'm pleased with that.
The problem with the pubs closing is that there seems to be an outcry when they close, and yet were they actually frequenting at the time? So I just hope that all the people that protested its closure will decide to go in there and buy a pint every now and again.
I totally agree. Yeah, well, we tried to raise a group. We did raise a group. the trouble was the Nostell Brewery wasn't very cooperative in what we were offering to do and trying to help towards it. So yeah, good luck to the people that have bought it, and I'll be going in there.
Okay. Well, if you get involved at all in the running or the restoration, make sure that they don't do anything with those curb protectors.
Yes.
That were forged. That were forged in Moorswater.
Yes. Yeah.
All the mountain steps, all the date
Yes,
stones.
that's right. Yeah.
Well, it's grade 2 listed, so everything should be preserved.
I think that's the previous owners or managers' reason for not doing anything with the toilet area, which they mustn't interfere with it.
Oh no! So it's still a stream running under the back garden.
Very much so.
Right. Should we call it a day then?
Any other questions? I'm just looking to see if anybody's waving.
Sue Holman.
Oh yes,
Yeah.
Sue.
Brian, you said one of the O family had written a history of the business. And did you say it's in the museum?
It's in the museum, and also if you frequent O's, they keep a copy there for you to look through.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, well,
But we do have a copy. I think I might have. If I've got a copy here, I'll pop it through your door.
okay, thank you. That'd be great. I'll let you have it back, obviously.
Do you want me to have a quick check to see if I've got it?
No,
Wait a minute.
no. Oh, you've had a busy day. Oh my.
Well, Brian's looking at that for anybody that can't access the chat. We have, thank you for everybody who's sharing their comments there. We've got some really interesting facts about bird's nest soup that was mentioned, and also Peak Freem's biscuits, which were baked in Bermondsey in London. So must have been sent down on the train to O's to sell. And we've got a note here for anybody that doesn't know, one of the most famous PF biscuits was the Garibaldi, the squashed fly biscuit.
Yes. Well, we all know that Mr. Pern from just outside Foy was Garibaldi's Englishman. He was Garibaldi's general, and he came to visit him in just outside Foy. Can't remember the name of the little hamlet. And the crowds came out in their thousands to greet Garibaldi. And if anybody wants to see a little account of his visit and a little bit of history of Pern, we seem to have amassed about half a dozen of these little booklets, and we can sell you one for 50p. And Sue, I have got it.
Oh, thank you.
Can I thank you again, Brian, for that really interesting talk and all the work that you put into it. And also thanks to everybody who's participated. It's been really lovely to have you all here, and particularly our international guests, which is one of the benefits of being able to do things online. So this is one of the first of the Liskeard Unlocked events. So people, as I say, thanks to everybody for taking part, and hope you're able to enjoy some of the other Liskeard Unlocked events, those of you who are local. Take care and good night.
Goodbye,
Bye.
everybody.
Bye.
Bye.